Picture this. It's 2 a.m. You've stayed up way too late doom scrolling, you shuffle into the bathroom, and the only light is coming from a street lamp outside. You wash your hands, look up into the mirror, and accidentally make eye contact with yourself. Normally, you just look away and go back to bed, but for some reason, tonight, you linger. You just stare. And after about 30 seconds, something deeply unsettling happens. The face looking back at you stops feeling like, well, your face.
So let me ask you, have you ever experienced that sudden, completely irrational wave of panic when your own reflection starts looking vaguely threatening in the dark? It's an objectively terrifying feeling. You absolutely know you're looking at yourself, but your brain is suddenly screaming that there's an imposter in the room. Well, let me reassure you right now, you are not losing your mind. You've just stumbled into a very well-documented, highly researched glitch in human perception. Welcome to our explainer on this very weird phenomenon.
Okay, let's dive into this, because the difference between what you think you look like and what you actually see in this situation is just absurd. You start out as a solid, continuous human being, but give it 30 seconds and you become a threatening, distorted blob. In the scientific literature, this is literally known as the strange face in the mirror illusion, and it perfectly illustrates that our brain's model of who we are is catastrophically fragile.
It turns out, all it takes to completely crash your brain's self-recognition software is a 3-ingredient scientific recipe. First, you need low light. Researchers pinpointed about 0.8 lux, which is basically just a dimly lit room, as the absolute sweet spot. Second, you need a face to look at. And third, you need prolonged, unblinking eye contact, just staring dead into the eyes. You combine those 3 things, your brain essentially blue screens. But why?
Section 1. Your lazy visual hardware.
To understand why your own face turns into a horror movie, we have to talk about the physical hardware failure that kicks off this entirely unnecessary existential crisis. Discovered way back in 1804 by a Swiss physician, Troxler's fading explains a fundamental flaw, or, maybe a feature, in our visual system. See, visual neurons are essentially lazy employees. If a stimulus doesn't change or move, they just stop paying attention to it. So if you stare unblinkingly at a single point, like your own eyes in the mirror, the unchanging visual information in your periphery, like your cheeks, your chin, your nose, literally begins to fade from your awareness.
It's all because of sensory adaptation. Think about it like dropping a small piece of paper on your arm. You feel it at first, right? But pretty soon, the tactile neurons adapt and just ignore it. In your vision, because the neurons beyond the rods and cones have these really large receptive fields, if you hold perfectly still, your visual hardware just drops the ball. It decides your own nose and cheeks are unimportant stimuli, so it gets bored and stops sending that data to the brain. And just like that, pieces of your face vanish.
Section 2. The brain's terrible autocomplete.
Disappearing cheeks are really only step 1. When the hardware fails and stops sending data, your brain's software has to step in. And unfortunately, the patch it applies is terrible. Enter the Caputo effect. When Troxler's fading wipes out your peripheral facial features, your brain panics. It absolutely hates missing information. So it relies on perceptual filling in. It grabs whatever sparse data it has, like the dim, shifting shadows on your face, and acts like a terrible smartphone autocorrect, frantically trying to guess what should be there. Starved of real data, it makes massive mistakes, giving you heavily distorted features or entirely new faces. It's basically a Capgras adjacent derealization happening to you in real time.
And the actual clinical setup used to study this is hilariously strict. To test the mirror gaze task and its even weirder cousin, the interpersonal gazing dyad task, researchers literally force participants to sit exactly 0.4 meters away from a mirror or from another person. They stare at a fixed point with a halogen light bulb placed just so behind them to get that perfect 0.8 lux dim lighting. I mean, it sounds like a gritty interrogation, but it's specifically designed to reliably induce these hallucinations, and guys, it works shockingly well.
Now, what's truly wild is the success rate here. When researchers pulled data across studies of non-clinical, totally healthy participants sitting in this exact setup, 58% of them hallucinated a completely new, strange face. More than half. And we're not talking about just a slightly blurrier version of themselves.
Let me just read you the absurd list of things healthy people actually report seeing instead of their own faces. In one major study, 18% saw a parent with deformed traits. 28% saw unknown strangers. 28% saw archetypes, like an old woman or a witch. 18% saw animal faces, like a cat, pig, or lion. and a staggering 48% reported seeing monstrous or fantastical beings. Your visual processing is literally so incompetent in the dark that instead of recognizing your own face, it decides, yep, for sure, that's a pig witch.
Section 3. Stranger danger in the mirror.
Now, if you think staring at yourself is bad, let's pivot to the even more terrifying variation of this experiment, the interpersonal gazing dyad task. This is where, instead of a mirror, you sit in the dark and stare dead into the eyes of a total stranger. And man, staring at another person in the dark breaks your brain even faster. The reporting of new, strange faces jumps significantly, up to around 76% for interpersonal gazing, compared to just 50% for mirror gazing. That's a massive jump. But it's not just what you see, it's how completely detached from reality you feel while doing it.
Check this out. The number 27 represents the massive spike in the CAD-DSS dissociation score during this dyad gazing. That score is basically a clinical measure of how deeply disconnected you feel from reality and your own body. For some context, a normal everyday baseline score is around 1.5 to 6, but if you stare at a stranger in a dim room for 10 minutes, your score skyrockets to a 27. You become profoundly, deeply disconnected from your own body.
Section 4. A catastrophically fragile self-model.
So what is actually happening in the brain here? Researchers propose a complete system crash in the self-referential processing network. Basically, the visual part of your brain stops talking to the part of your brain that maintains your psychological identity. The bridge just collapses. But how do the experts interpret this? Well, Giovanni Caputo, the main researcher behind all this, leaned heavily into some wild Jungian theories. He actually suggested these apparitions could be psychodynamic projections of unconscious mental contents, like literal manifestations of an individual's shadow or the collective unconscious. Now, we're giving that a very heavy dose of wry side-eye here. I mean, sure, it sounds incredibly cool and spooky to think you're staring at the dark side of your soul.
But we need to reassure you, it is not a monster. It's not your Jungian shadow. It is quite literally just terrible brain Photoshop. What you're experiencing is an overweighted top-down modulation error caused by sensory deprivation. Your visual system drops the data because of Troxler's fading, and your brain just frantically plasters whatever textures and shadows it can find to fill the void, totally unmoored from reality. It is a localized hallucination driven by a desperate biological need to recognize a face, even if it's the completely wrong one.
So, knowing all this about how hilariously buggy your visual hardware and software really are, the next time you wake up, shuffle to the bathroom, and make accidental eye contact with yourself in the dark at 2 a.m., just remember, it takes less than 30 seconds of uninterrupted eye contact for your brain's catastrophically fragile self-model to fully convince itself that the person staring back might not actually be you. The question is, when the face starts to shift, who is actually staring back?